I'm Denzil Rankine, for those of you who don't know me already, Chief Executive of AMR International, the strategy consulting firm in media. And I'm very pleased just to spend a few minutes talking to you about the white paper that you have in front of you. We just have a black cover on it to confuse all of you. So white paper that we're publishing today, linked to today's conference. And we're looking at the future of media organizations. I said to Roland last year, well, we've done a lot of looking at the past and worrying about how tough life has been, but are we really having a think about what a media organization is going to look like in the future? Some of you in the room have helped us with the work we've done on this over the past few months, and I'm just going to share a few thoughts with you coming out of the white paper. They might be a little bit provocative, and they are somewhat general, because when we talk about media, of course, that's such a broad sector. So we're pretty much looking at the transformation of sort of old print businesses into the new world. So let me just give you a few tasters from this. You'll have the white paper you can have a look at in your own time. And this afternoon I'll be moderating a panel where the panel is going to be looking at this in a bit of detail. So first and foremost, just a few of the highlights of some of the things that we see will be sort of happening to media organizations and the implications for media organizations in the future. First one is understanding customers. A lot of media organizations have said over the past, well, we're close to our customers, we know our customers. I guess we do an awful lot of customer work and customer due diligence, and time after time, we've gone back to organizations and said, well, maybe you didn't quite know your customers as well as you used to, as well as you thought you did. We think that customer understanding is going to have to improve in the future, and there's going to have to be a fundamental understanding of customers. And technology is a route to go down to get there. But customer needs are changing. Customer expectations have been fundamentally changed by technology. And a media organization can't simply pump out what its editorial function thinks is interesting. It has to really relate to customer needs. And that means a fundamental rethinking and closeness to customers. Second big point we bring out is technology. Not a great surprise. But technology skills in the future will be endemic to an organization, as opposed to a department with people who speak gobbledygook. In the future, media companies will effectively be technology companies with those technology skills endemic throughout the organization. And in the panel, I'll be talking quite a lot about, well, how do you get there? Because that's a challenge. How do we embed those skills? What does that actually mean? When I was preparing this, as one CEO of a B2B company said, yeah, 50% of my staff are SEO, SEM trained, capable, and literate. Challenge, where are other organizations on that? So that's just one example. The next thing is people costs are going to rise. And I'll show you just a little bit of data to back that up. In the future, media organizations are likely to have a smaller staff, they're likely to have highly qualified people, and they will be paid more. And that is linked in to the other points which I'm going to make about collaboration is going to have to increase across functions. The silos which we see in traditional media companies are going to be broken down because we're going to have more cooperation in between the traditional silos, say editorial circulation, sales, or whatever, or across brands, and collaboration outside of the organization. We don't have to own everything. We can partner, we can rent, we can outsource. This means that complexity is going to increase. And so we're going to find that the organizations will be functioning in a more complex way. There are implications, obviously, for incentives there. But all of those will link back to the point about an increase in talent, the talent quality, and the cost of that talent. And the cost structures are going to change. In the work we did, you could argue that the cost structures haven't changed fundamentally to date, and I'll show you a value chain just at the end of this to give some indicative views about how those cost structures will change. But those are just some of the takeaways at a high level as to what we see as being the challenges for a media organization of the future. So let's just give you a couple of data charts, and then we'll look at the value chain. And then after that, Reed is going to take us through sort of 4 interesting case studies of businesses in transformation. First message is a higher share of digital revenue means a higher average revenue per employee and higher average comp per employee. We looked at quite a number of companies and put them on a chart, and you can see a very simple trend. We've just taken 3 here to make the point. So we have a company with 100% digital revenue on the left, and then we have an example company 30% digital, an example company with 12% digital. And you can see the simple trend there. Digital businesses have higher average revenue per employees and higher average comp per employee. Traditional media is reinventing itself, moving towards digital businesses. There's a simple implication there about the talent and the cost of that talent. Again, we'll think later on the panel as to how it's possible to get there if we're starting from the old world. Here is a sobering piece of data looking at the extent to which media organizations have embraced technology. It's pretty simple. Straw man look at this. We surveyed a number of major organizations and industries which have been disrupted. So we chose retail, travel, we looked at book publishing and traditional print media. And we simply looked at the extent to which technology is represented at top management level, i.e. on the board. And what we can see is that retail and travel have a higher representation of technology on the board than traditional media. And that backs up some of the comments being made to us by people who've come out from outside the industry and into media as to the extent to which, well, media has actually been somewhat slower to embrace technology than some other industries which have been disrupted. So there's a sobering thought about the way technology has been dealt with in media organizations. And I guess the next point, just the last piece of data I'll show you before we look at the value chain, is looking at the levels of investment. And we've just taken 4 example companies, and we've looked at the level of investment which they're making. And what we can see is that these digital businesses are spending up to 20% of revenue on product development. Now, in Google, you could argue that figure's way undercooked because we know that people at Google are encouraged to spend 20% of their time on non-core activities. So if we change that number, we could shoot that up. But that gives an indication of the investment level that digital businesses are putting into technology. And again, that's sobering thinking for those businesses in transformation. Finally, I'm just going to show you this is a straw man value chain of a traditional media business. There are some guesses here at how costs have been allocated. And because this is an amalgam of different forms of media and publishing, I'm sure everyone's going to be able to say some of these percentages are wrong, and they don't add up to 100. There's 10% left over on purpose. But let's just look at what has been the value chain of a media business. Circulation's been about 10% of activity. If we go forward and look at the future, we're going to find that circulation, we need to change that to audience marketing in what we call that. So we need to change the approach and the words we're using for it. And we see that the level of cost and investment is going to go up. So indicatively, we said from 10 to 15%. Advertising, marketing, and sales, 20%. That's going up perhaps as far as 30%. Because we're going to have a far more sophisticated approach towards understanding customer needs and dealing with those, and we're going to have a higher incented sales force in the future. Content creation, 20%. Well, I think we need to change what we call that. Content creation, community development, curation, all of these words are kicked around. I don't think everyone knows quite what curation means yet, but we have to really leverage our users and our community for the content in the future. That could stay at 20%. You could argue that we're going to pump out a lot more volume for that 20%, and maybe that should go down, so we can take the cost down, depending upon the relevance of the volume we're creating. Manufacturing, well, that obviously turns to product development and execution. You could argue that could go down as a cost base. And distribution is fundamentally cheaper, and we call that delivery, and maybe that's going to go to 10% of the cost base. All indicative numbers, but I think the important thing is to think about the change in the words and the change in the mindset that businesses have to go through in order to face the future markets. So in the past, we've talked about understanding customers, and I've said that I think some companies have paid more lip service to that than really it being reality. And there's been an emphasis on sort of efficient production and distribution. We think the three core competencies of the future, the first one are going to be a fundamental understanding of customers. And by that, what we mean is really having an organization that is actually customer-focused, reaches out to customers, and uses technology to gain that fundamental understanding of customers. And that's a change in mindset. The second one is obviously innovation and creating leading-edge digital products, or you could go further to say providing services, products and services in a platform-agnostic way to our customer communities. We could look at it that way if we wanted to. But I think it's going to be a continuous development program, not just a project-by-project approach in new media organizations of the future. And the final point is managing complexity, because we're looking at a far more complex organization, a far more complex markets, wider sets of relationships, different relationships, and as a result of that, I've talked about the change in talent which will be required. So that's how we see a sort of a value chain in the future of a media organization, and the idea is just to stimulate people's thinking about that.